Evelyn first told me about her new friend on a Tuesday evening in late October, back when the air smelled like burning leaves and the sun slipped away before we even finished dinner. I remember the way she spoke, calm, casual, like she was telling me about a classmate from the playground. She sat at the table swinging her little legs, her fork pushing peas around her plate when she looked up and said, "Daddy, can my friend come inside for dinner too?" At first I thought she meant one of the neighborhood kids. We lived on a quiet road, only 4 houses deep, surrounded by acres of woods, thick enough that sunlight felt like a visitor rather than a resident. Kids rarely wandered out this way. So I asked her the logical question, "Who's your friend?" Her smile flickered with an innocence only a 6-year-old could muster. "She stays in the woods," she said. "She watches us from the trees. She said you're nice." Something about that sentence stuck to my skin the way cold sweat does. The woods behind our house stretched for miles. Old pine, jagged oak, tangled underbrush where foxes and coyotes sometimes passed through. Evelyn had no business playing anywhere near them. We'd warned her about ticks, snakes, and strangers, but the way she said "she" made my pulse tick a little harder than it should have. I pressed further, trying to keep my voice even. "What's her name?" Evelyn shrugged, the movement small but strangely mechanical. "She won't tell me. She says names are private." She frowned, trying to remember something. "She said you shouldn't ask that. She doesn't like when adults ask questions." That was the first moment, the very first, when a thin seam of dread cracked open in my chest. I brushed it off, of course, because that's what parents do when children say unnerving things. Kids have vivid imaginations, I told myself. Kids invent friends, especially lonely ones. But Evelyn wasn't lonely. She was bright, social, a little shy at times, but always warm and open with people. For her to invent a friend hiding in the woods felt uncharacteristic. After dinner, I watched her through the kitchen window as she stood near the tree line. The dusk light smeared the sky into a bruised purple, shadows stretching longer and darker across the grass. She wasn't calling for anyone, just standing, still, too still, like she was waiting for someone to step out from between the trunks. I walked outside together, but the moment she heard the back door creak open, she turned around with a wide smile. Too wide, like a secret she couldn't wait to share. She ran to me, threw her arms around my waist, and whispered, "She says you can't see her yet, not until she's ready." That night, after Evelyn was asleep, I replayed the conversation in my head. Something primal inside me, a quiet ancestral alarm, kept tugging at my nerves. Imaginary friends weren't new to parenting, but they usually had silly names. They lived in doll houses or teacups, not in the forest behind your home. And they didn't talk about being ready to be seen. I checked the locks twice, maybe 3 times. I pulled the curtains closed, even though I hated doing that. It made the house feel smaller, like the darkness outside had its face pressed against the glass. Around midnight, I heard footsteps. Soft, deliberate, almost graceful. I assumed Evelyn had gotten up to use the bathroom, but when I peeked into the hallway, the space was empty. The footsteps didn't come from above. They came from outside, near the back porch. I stood frozen, listening through the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the low creak of the floorboards settling beneath the house. For a moment, I heard nothing. And then 3 taps, gentle, spaced out, on the kitchen window. Not knocks, taps, like someone testing the glass with a fingernail. I walked to the window slowly, my hand hovering over the curtain. Before I touched it, a whisper, paper thin and undeniably real, slid through the glass. "I like your house." I jumped so hard the curtain bunched in my fist. My heart hammered against my ribs, my breath caught somewhere between my throat and lungs. I whipped the curtain aside, expecting, no, bracing, to see someone there. A face, a silhouette, anything. But there was nothing. Just the yard, dark and still under the cold moonlight. The tree swayed softly as though something had moved between them just moments before. When I checked Evelyn's room, she was asleep, her tiny hand dangling over the edge of the bed, but her lips moved faintly, like she was whispering. I leaned closer to hear. She murmured only one word, but it froze me in place. Closer. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with the lights dimmed, watching the back door, listening for anything that didn't belong in a quiet suburban home. At some point, exhaustion dragged me under, but even then I dreamed of small footprints in the dew outside, and a voice, soft, feminine, patient, whispering from somewhere just beyond the tree line. Let me in. When morning arrived, Evelyn woke bright and cheerful, as if nothing at all had happened. She ate her cereal, humming a tune I didn't recognize, topping her spoon against the bowl in a rhythm that felt purposeful. When I asked her about her friend again, she only said, "She wants to meet you soon, Daddy. She said she likes how you listen." That was the moment everything shifted. Because those words, those exact words, were the same ones whispered through my kitchen window the night before. And I knew, without a sliver of doubt, that my daughter's imaginary friend wasn't imaginary at all.
The morning after Evelyn's strange comments felt colder than it should have been. Frost clung to the edges of the windows, though the forecast hadn't mentioned even a hint of freezing temperatures for the area. The house itself seemed quieter, as if the walls were bracing for something I had yet to understand. Normally, Evelyn would bounce around the house before school, sliding in her socks across the hardwood floor, giggling at her own jokes, but today she moved with an unusual calmness. She hummed that same tune from the night before, slow, melodic, repetitive. It felt like the kind of melody designed to lull or summon rather than entertain. While she dressed for school, I stepped outside to clear my thoughts, pulling my jacket tight as the cold bit into my skin. The grass sparkled with a thin sheet of frost that caught the early sunlight, making the yard look deceptively peaceful. But the moment I stepped off the porch, my stomach sank. Tiny footprints, far too small to be an adult's, but just a little narrower, a little longer than a child's, were embedded in the frost leading from the tree line to the back door. They weren't Evelyn's. I knew the tread of her shoes. These prints had a strange, almost delicate shape to them. Bare feet. A child-sized something had walked across the yard in the freezing night. But what made my breath hitch was the fact that the prints didn't lead back to the woods. They simply stopped at the back door, as if whoever or whatever had been there was waiting, watching, deciding. I crouched and touched one of the prints. The frost had melted there slightly, as if the creature's foot had been warm, human warmth. But the shape wasn't right. The arch was too high, the toes pointed strangely, almost tapered. No shoe, no sock, just skin against frozen grass. A sharp sound behind me made my heart slam against my ribs. Evelyn stood at the back door, her backpack hanging loosely off one shoulder, staring at the prints with a soft smile. Not a frightened one, an affectionate one. "She said she walked close last night," Evelyn murmured, rubbing her eyes. "She said she wanted to see if she could come inside." I tried to disguise the tremor in my voice. "Who told you that?" She blinked, confused by the question. "My friend, Daddy. She told me in my dream." A chill ran through me that had nothing to do with the cold morning air. Dreams were one thing, but synchronized behaviors, someone whispering outside my house and Evelyn repeating the same lines, were another. I forced myself to remain calm, to pretend this was still within the realm of something explainable. Kids overheard things, repeated them, connected imaginary dots, but the prints on the lawn were not imaginary. I cleaned the frost from my fingers and stood. "Evelyn, sweetie, I don't want you near the woods anymore. Not even close. You understand?" She stared up at me, her eyes wide and confused. But she lives there. She gets lonely. She told me that." I swallowed hard. "I don't care, sweetheart. It's not safe. You stay away from the trees." Her expression changed, subtly, but enough for me to feel it like a blow. She wasn't angry, just disappointed. She won't like that. The way she said it, flat, factual, like she was stating tomorrow's weather forecast, made something deep inside me tighten. The drive to school was quiet. Evelyn stared out the window at the passing woods, her finger lightly tracing shapes on the glass. Every few minutes, she whispered something I couldn't hear. She didn't sound like she was talking to herself. She sounded like she was answering someone. When we arrived, she unbuckled her seatbelt and leaned closer to me. "Daddy?" "Yes." "She wants to come tonight." My pulse quickened. "Come where?" Evelyn smiled gently, almost apologetically. "Inside." A knot formed in my stomach. No one is coming inside. This time her smile faded completely, replaced by an expression I had never seen on her face before. Pity. "You should be nicer," she whispered. "She said you were nice before. She doesn't want to think you're mean." I didn't have time to respond. She slid out of the car, closed the door, and walked into the school building with the slow, thoughtful steps of someone listening to a voice I couldn't hear. When I returned home, the feeling of being watched settled into my bones like a sickness. I walked the perimeter of the house, checking windows, doors, the edges of the woods. Every so often, I thought I caught a flicker of movement between the trunks, something low to the ground, something pale. But each time I focused on it, it vanished.
At lunch, I called the school counselor, gently asking if Evelyn had mentioned imaginary friends during class. She hadn't. She seemed perfectly normal, participating, laughing, drawing, nothing unusual at all. That was almost more disturbing. Whatever this presence was, she didn't follow Evelyn to school. She stayed here, near our home, near the woods, near me. By late afternoon, the sunlight had dimmed under a thick blanket of clouds. I stood at the kitchen sink, staring toward the tree line again, when movement drew my eye. Something stood between the two largest pines, a small silhouette, barely the height of a child, unmoving. My breath caught as I squinted, trying to make out features. But then the silhouette retreated, melting backward into the shadows with impossible smoothness. No shifting weight, no footsteps, just gliding into darkness. I stepped away from the window, heart thudding, hands trembling. A part of me wanted to run into the woods and confront whatever was out there. Another part, the part older than logic, older than language, the part that understood fear as instinct, told me to lock every door and never look outside again. As evening neared, I tried to push down the dread. I made dinner, set the table, washed the dishes. Normal things. But the whole time, I felt watched, observed, judged. When I picked Evelyn up from school, she climbed into the backseat quietly and buckled herself in. No humming, no drawing shapes on the window, just silence. Halfway home, she asked, "Daddy, did you see her today?" I didn't answer at first. My grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Who?" Evelyn tilted her head, confused by my stupidity. "My friend. She told me you saw her. She said you looked scared." A cold sweat broke across my neck. "Evelyn, what exactly did she tell you?" She smiled again. The same soft, apologetic smile from the morning. "She said she's ready to meet you now." That night, as the last light trained from the sky and our home sank into the quiet envelope of darkness, a soft tapping echoed through the house again. This time, not from the window, from the back door. Slow, patient, almost polite. And Evelyn, upstairs in her room, whispered through the floorboards, "She's here, Daddy."
should let her in."
The tapping at the back door continued with an unsettling rhythm, slow and deliberate, like someone feeling their way through the wood grain with the tip of a fingernail. I stood in the hallway, halfway between the living room and the kitchen, frozen in place. The house was dimly lit, not dark, but not warm either, as if the bulbs themselves sensed something was wrong and refused to glow at full strength. The tapping stopped. Silence spread through the house like fog, thick and heavy, filling every corner until even the air felt weighted. Above me, the soft creep of the floorboards signaled Evelyn moving around her room. I didn't call for her. I didn't want her to startle her, didn't want her coming downstairs to see whatever might have been outside. I forced myself forward one step at a time, my pulse throbbing behind my eyes. When I reached the kitchen doorway, I saw the back door silhouetted in the soft spill of the porch light. The curtain hung still. The room was dead quiet. I almost allowed myself to believe I'd imagined everything. Then the handle twisted. Not violently, not like someone was trying to break in. Gently, curious, testing. I felt the blood drain from my face, my breath hitching as the metal clicked softly under pressure. The lock held, thank God, but the unseen visitor tried again, this time with a little more insistence. A faint scrape followed, nails or fingers or something dry dragging down the door. I stepped backward until my spine pressed against the counter. Then Evelyn's voice floated down the stairs, soft and firm, as if she were repeating instructions. "It's okay, Dottie. She promised not to hurt us." I swallowed hard. "Evelyn, stay upstairs." No response, just the whisper of her feet across the carpet and the faint thump of her bedroom door closing. The handle twisted a third time, sharper and patient now. But when I reached for the nearest object, a heavy glass mixing bowl, the handle stopped abruptly. No more tapping, no scraping, no sound at all. I approached the door slowly, bowl raised, and leaned just close enough to see through a tiny gap in the curtain. The porch was empty, but the frost, still clinging to the boards, held new prints. Small, bare footprints facing the door, and beside them, a pair of handprints. So small, yet the fingers were too long, the palms too narrow. My stomach lurched. Beneath the handprints, pressed into the frost, was a message traced by a childlike finger. "Hello, Daddy." I jerked the curtain closed and locked the deadbolt a second time. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in the hallway with all the lights on, one eye on the hallway, the other on the sliding glass door that led to the backyard. Every so often, the wind pushed against the house with a groan, and shadows swayed across the curtains in ways that made my heart skip. Around 2 a.m., as my exhaustion began to blur the edges of my vision, a faint fecal echoed from upstairs. Not Evelyn's. Too light, too airy, it drifted downward like dust falling through a sunbeam. I stood abruptly. The giggle came again, and then Evelyn's voice. "Not yet. Dottie's scared." I moved quickly but quietly up the staircase, feeling each step creak like a betrayal. When I reached her bedroom door, I pressed my ear against it. Evelyn was whispering, fast and soft, the way children do when they're talking under blankets during a sleepover. But there was another sound layered beneath her voice, something faint, rhythmic, like someone breathing through a thin slit in their teeth. I opened the door. Evelyn sat cross-legged on her bed facing the far corner of the room. The nightlight beside her cast a warm amber glow, illuminating her silhouette. But the corner she was staring into was swallowed in darkness, deeper than the rest of the room. She didn't turn when I entered, didn't flinch, didn't acknowledge me at all. Her gaze stayed fixed on the shadowed corner, or rather on the space just past it. "Evelyn," I whispered, trying to keep my voice calm, "who are you talking to?" She finally turned her head towards me, but only halfway. Her eyes didn't meet mine. They remained fixed on my shoulder, or rather on the space just past it. "Daddy, she says you should go to bed. She says she'll wait." I looked at the corner. Nothing.
no movement, no shape. But the darkness felt wrong, like it had depth, like it was hiding something just out of sight. "Sweetheart," I said, stepping closer to her, "there's nobody there." She finally turned fully towards me then, and that was worse, because her expression wasn't confused or scared. It was sympathetic. "She's shy," Evelyn whispered, glancing back at the corner, "and she doesn't like when you lie." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. "What did she tell you?" She paused, listening to something I couldn't hear, and then she said you saw her at the porch." My skin prickled. "I didn't see anyone." Another pause, another moment of listening, and then Evelyn shook her head slowly, her voice almost regretful. "She says you're lying again." I forced myself not to look at the corner again. I didn't want to, because some buried instinct told me that if I did see something, I wouldn't be able to look away. I gently pulled the blanket over Evelyn's legs. "Sweetie, it's really late. Try to get some sleep." She didn't argue. But before I turned off the light, she said something that sank deep under my skin and stayed there like a splinter. "Daddy, she wants to play a game with you tomorrow." I forced a shaky smile. "What kind of game?" Evelyn looked up at me. Her eyes were calm, too calm. "Hide and seek." I slept in the hallway that night, sitting against the wall with a blanket wrapped around me and the bedroom doors cracked open. I listened to every sound, the house settling, the wind brushing the pane, the occasional soft whisper from Evelyn's room. At some point after 4 a.m., something lightly touched the carpet, like footsteps heading down the hall. But when I lifted my head, the hallway was empty. Empty, but wrong. Colder than before, like something had been there a moment ago. Morning came with a dull gray sky and a fog so thick that it swallowed the trees behind our house. Even from the porch, the woods were barely more than a smudged wall of shifting shadows. Evelyn wore her backpack and waited quietly by the door, humming her strange tune again. When she saw me watching her, she offered a soft smile. "She wants to play when I get home. She said you don't get to hide."
Night in our house had become a thing I feared, an unbearable stretch of hours filled with creaks, whispers, and the constant sense of being watched by someone who was never quite there when I turned my head. But the night everything changed began unnervingly quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels manufactured, as if someone or something is holding its breath, waiting. Emily had fallen asleep early, curled up with her blanket, her tiny hand resting on the empty space beside her as if expecting someone to hold it. Her stuffed toys faced the corner again. I didn't bother moving them anymore. I had become too afraid of disrupting whatever pattern she and Luna seemed to have agreed upon. At 2:03 a.m. exactly, I woke up to the familiar sound. Footsteps in the hallway. Small, light. Not mine, not Emily's. They stopped just outside my door. Then came the whisper. "Mommy." Emily's voice, or at least it sounded like her, but something inside me recoiled instantly. A mother knows. A mother can tell when her child is speaking, and when something else is wearing her voice like a mask. My heart hammered violently against my ribs. I didn't answer. I couldn't. The doorknob twitched. Once. Twice. Then, slowly, began to turn. I bolted upright and hissed, "Emily!" The turning stopped. Silence stretched thin like a thread. Then, a soft giggle. Not Emily's. This giggle was breathier, higher, too close. And then the footsteps moved, away from my door, down the hallway, back toward Emily's room. I scrambled out of bed, every instinct screaming at me to protect my daughter. As I rushed into the hallway, the air felt colder, dense, almost metallic. The lights flickered, struggling against some unseen interference. When I reached Emily's room, her door was wide open, swinging gently as if someone had passed through just seconds earlier. "Emily?" I whispered. She was sitting upright in her bed, wide awake, her eyes fixed on the corner, the same corner her toys always faced. She didn't look frightened. She looked resigned. "She said you were coming, Mommy," murmured without looking at me. "Who? Luna?" Emily's finally turned her head toward me, but there was something strained in her expression, as though she was being careful, watched. "She's mad, Mommy. You weren't supposed to get up. You weren't supposed to hear her." A cold shock traveled down my spine. "Emily, tell me the truth. What is Luna?" Emily's eyes flicked to the empty, dark corner of the room. Then, very slowly, she shook her head. "I can't." "Sweetheart, you can. You have to. I need to know how to help you." Emily's lower lip trembled. Her fingers dug anxiously into her blanket. Then she leaned forward, as if someone behind her might overhear. "She comes from the wall." The room felt instantly smaller, the air thicker. "What do you mean?" I asked, barely able to speak. Emily's voice cracked as she whispered, "She crawls out. Sometimes at night, sometimes when you're not home. She talks to me from inside the walls. She says she's lonely. She says I'm her favorite." My knees felt weak. I sank onto the edge of her bed, clutching her tiny hands. "Emily, sweetheart, has she touched you?" Emily nodded slowly. "Only to hold my hand. She said she needs me to stay warm." A chill ran across my entire body, raising every hair on my arms. "She told me something else too," Emily whispered. "What?" I breathed. Emily swallowed hard, tears filling her eyes. "She said she used to be alive. She said her mommy left her in the dark and that she waited and waited and waited." Emily's small voice broke. "She said she doesn't like when mommies walk away." My blood ran cold. "I didn't walk away. I would never leave you." Emily shook her head, crying now. "Not you. Her. Her mommy. She said she found me because I look like her, because I remind her." I pulled Emily into my arms, but she stiffened immediately, staring over my shoulder, toward the wall behind me. "She's there," Emily whispered, her voice shaking violently. "Don't turn around." My heart nearly stopped. I didn't turn. I couldn't. Every instinct screamed to run, but my daughter clung to me, trembling so hard I could feel her shivers pulse through my chest. The air behind me grew unbearably cold, so cold that my breath began to fog. Then came the whisper, right against the back of my neck. "I finally get to meet you." Emily started sobbing silently, her face pressed against my shirt. I squeezed her tightly, trying to stay calm even as my entire body shook. Then something thin and fragile, like the fingers of a small child, brushed gently across my hair. "Don't be scared," the voice cooed softly. "I only want what you took." My pulse roared in my ears. "I didn't take anything," I whispered hoarsely, refusing to turn toward whatever was behind me. A low, drawn-out exhale drifted over my skin. "You took her away from me." Emily's grip tightened. I could feel her tears soaking through my shirt. I forced myself to speak. "What do you want from us?" Silence. Then, "A mother." My blood went cold as ice. Emily's sobs grew frantic, but before I could move, before I could scream, something tapped gently on my shoulder. Tap, tap, tap. As if patiently waiting for me to give it attention. As if reminding me I wasn't alone in that room, and neither was my daughter.
The next morning should have brought relief. Daylight usually softened the shadows, warmed the air, made the strange whispers that roamed the halls at night feel like tricks of an overtired mind. But that morning, sunlight meant nothing. The house still felt dim, as though the light itself refused to enter certain corners, especially Emily's room. Emily wouldn't leave my side. She clung to my arm as though she expected at any moment for something to pull her away. Her face was pale, her usually rosy cheeks drained of color, her eyes rimmed in exhaustion. I didn't ask her to talk. I didn't dare force her to relive what had happened in the night. Instead, I focused on one thing only: We needed to leave the house. I packed a small bag for her. Clothes, her favorite stuffed bunny, a snack, anything I thought might comfort her. Emily stood silently in the doorway, watching with a strange mix of hope and fear. "Sweetheart," I said gently, "we're going somewhere safe, okay?" She nodded, but her expression didn't change. Instead, she whispered, "She won't let us." My hands froze. Goosebumps rippled across my arms. I zipped the bag quickly and took her hand. "We're going to try," I told her firmly. We walked toward the front door together. The hallway felt colder the closer we got, as though the air itself was trying to push us back. My footsteps echoed unnaturally, and Emily's small, trembling breaths rang louder than they should have. I grabbed the doorknob, turned it, pulled. It didn't budge. Locked from the inside, somehow. I twisted harder. The metal burned with freezing cold. Emily whispered, "She's awake." Then the lights flickered violently. The hallway darkened until only the edges of the window frames glowed faintly. And from inside the wall to our right came a soft dragging sound, like fingernails being pulled slowly across wood from the other side. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Emily clutched my shirt, burying her face against my side. Her voice shook so hard she could barely speak. "She won't let us leave the way my mommy did." "Emily," I said, forcing calm even as terror gripped my throat, "stay behind me." But Emily shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "She wants you to stay. She wants you to promise." Something cracked behind the wall. A narrow indentation pushed outward, stretching the paint into a bulging outline, like the shape of a small head pressed against it. The voice that slipped through the wall was impossibly soft, impossibly close. "Be my mother." The bulge in the wall moved slowly, sliding along the hallway toward us, following the sound of her whispering plea. "Don't leave me again." I backed up, pulling Emily with me, heart pounding so violently it hurt. "No," I whispered, refusing to break. "You can't have us." Emily sobbed into my side, shaking so hard she almost collapsed. "She'll get mad," she choked. "Mommy, please, she'll get really mad." The house groaned. Every door in the hallway slammed shut at once. The overhead light exploded, showering tiny shards of glass across the floor. Emily screamed. I shielded her with my body, feeling the sting of glass slashing across my arms. From the wall, the giggle came again. Higher, sharper, excited. "You're mine now." Something inside the wall began to claw outward, splintering wood as pale, tiny fingers cracked through the drywall. 5 in total, all small, all twisted, all reaching. I grabbed Emily in my arms and ran, past the kitchen, toward the back door. My breath was ragged, my vision swimming. My legs felt like they were wading through thick mud. The house fought us. Every step felt heavier. When I reached the back door and yanked it open, a blast of warm sunlight hit my face. Real sunlight, bright and full and hopeful. I stepped 1 foot out. Emily clutched tight in my arms. Just as I crossed the threshold, something grabbed the back of my shirt. Something cold, small, desperate. Emily screamed. I screamed. And then, just as the grip tightened, Emily shouted with all her strength, "Luna, stop!" Everything froze. The air, the light, the pull on my shirt. Even the wind outside seemed to hold still. Slowly, the cold grip loosened. A faint, trembling voice whispered from just behind us. "Don't leave me." For the first time, the voice didn't sound angry. It sounded heartbreakingly young, exhausted, abandoned. Emily swallowed her fear long enough to whisper, "I'm sorry, Luna, but she's my mommy." Silence. Then a soft, broken sob echoed out from the wall behind us, so full of pain and longing that my own chest trembled hearing it. Okay. The grip released fully. I didn't look back. I didn't dare. I ran out of the house, holding Emily so tightly she gasped for breath. We sprinted across the yard, down the street, and straight into the arms of safety, whatever that meant now. The house didn't chase us. The doors didn't slam. The walls didn't speak. But as we reached the end of the block, Emily looked over my shoulder. "Mommy," she breathed, pointing. At her bedroom window, a tiny face peeked through, pale, hollow-eyed, watching us leave. The figure raised one small hand and waved. For the first time, Emily didn't wave back. She buried her face in my chest and whispered, "She's sad, but she knows I'm not hers." I held my daughter close, trembling, grateful, terrified. As we walked away from the house forever, I couldn't shake the feeling burning at the back of my neck that the little face in the window wasn't just watching us go. It was waiting. Waiting for another child. Another lonely room. Another mother who didn't listen soon enough. A new friend. A new replacement. A new chance to crawl back out of the walls.